Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Last time we looked at Nikon's D3400 compared to Canon's Rebel T6. Now both those cameras were fairly close and evenly matched. We did see some pretty big differences. However, today we're going to be looking at two other cameras from Canon and Nikon, the Nikon D5600 and the Canon Rebel T6i. How do these cameras compare? Well, I'll tell you guys right now, both these cameras are much closer than the previous two models we looked at. I had a very difficult time coming up with conclusive ways of discerning the differences between both. So I'll tell you guys right now, a lot of this is going to come down to your personal preference. But if you'd like to see all the details and all the fine nuances, stick around and we'll take a closer look. Okay, so one of the main areas where I thought we'd see a huge difference between both these cameras was in terms of video autofocus. But I was later reminded that on the Rebel T6i, it does not feature Canon's dual pixel CMOS technology. Instead, it uses a very similar technology, but basically it's more of a contrast-based system, so we don't see the autofocus performance that we see on Canon's higher-end models, like say for example the 7D Mark II or the 80D. So, after doing a little bit more testing, I discovered that both these cameras are actually pretty evenly matched in video autofocus as well. Now, on Canon's upcoming T7i, which of course we'll be taking a look at, that camera does feature dual CMOS autofocus technology. But for the time being today, let's go ahead and dive right in, and we'll take a look at the Rebel T6i and the Nikon D5600. Taking a closer look at the Nikon D5600 and the Canon Rebel T6i, we've never been so close in comparing two cameras. On paper, these cameras seem like they are basically the same thing. They both do 5 frames a second. They both do very good quality video. They're both 24 megapixels. They're both about the same size, the same price tag. They both have, wireless capabilities. They both have moving touchscreens and so on and so forth. But they're very different in a few key areas. And it kind of just mostly depends on what type of user experience you're expecting. If you want to be able to do video. Okay guys, sorry for the very random cut in. Basically I had to change up a little part of this video. I was initially going to give the win to the Canon in terms of video, but upon doing some further testing, I discovered that there's really not a huge difference in terms of autofocus speed between both these cameras. I had my buddy Cody here walking towards the camera. You guys can kind of see the setup here. Face detection's turned on. And so, anyways, I did the test, with the Canon and with Nikon. And actually, after doing this test, I discovered that both these cameras did extremely well. Now, if you're really serious about video and you want, or if you're very serious rather about having good video autofocus, I recommend going up to the Canon 80D because that's where we see Canon really pull ahead. But on these cameras, I feel like they're both pretty evenly matched. There's the results. That's the Canon there. They both kind of have a little bit of a bounce whenever they finally come into focus. But I mean, they're both pretty good. There's really no difference between both these. So I kind of changed up the video and decided to do this little demonstration for you guys to show you how these both fare. So yeah. In terms of video, I don't think you could go wrong with either one unless you want the ability to have a little bit more frame rate options. The Nikon D5600 does add a little bit more in that area. So if you're wanting to do a little bit more advanced use, the Nikon makes more sense. So anyways, guys, back to the regularly scheduled review. And 3, 2, 1, go. Unfortunately, if you're in video mode, we're still limited on this camera in terms of our frame rates. So this camera, if you're shooting in 1080p, can only do up to 30 frames a second. So that's going to be a big downside. The Nikon does give us the ability to go up to 60 frames a second in 1080. So if we're wanting to be able to do like, some slow motion effects or something like that, this is going to be an advantage to those types of users. So it kind of just all comes down to what you want to do. In terms of the ergonomics between both cameras, they're very, very similar. I would encourage you to go out and get these cameras in your hand if possible. Now for me, personally, I don't do very good using any of the entry-level DSLRs because their viewfinders are just too tiny for me. So even whenever I started out, I had to go with the mid-range body, and that's pretty much the minimum camera I can kind of use comfortably, but that's my personal preference. For you, you may find yourself liking one over the other. I will tell you guys that both these cameras feel entirely different in hand. The Nikon has a very, very deep grip, so if you have large hands, that could be an advantage. But the Canon doesn't feel terrible either, so I would say that's more of a personal preference thing. As far as our connections go, you'll notice that we have a lot more connections restored on this level of camera versus the super bare bones 3400 and T6. We do have the ability to have a wired remote jack and a microphone jack on both these models. So we're not limited by our connections at all. And we have the exact same ports on both these cameras. So very nice there. They both have the moving touch screens. I'd say that they're both high quality. In terms of wireless connectivity, this is where things get to be interesting. Both cameras have NFC. You can see the contact point on the Nikon is right here on the side. The Canon has that contact point down here on the bottom. As of right now in February 2017, when I'm making this video, I have to say that the Nikon has some downsides in wireless connectivity. It does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you can actually use the smartphone app to fire the camera remotely as well as transfer images. But because of Nikon SnapBridge, we're severely limited right now. And Nikon allegedly is going to be coming out with a fix very, very soon. I've heard some people at Nikon actually tell me that whenever the new iOS version comes out, there are going to be some fixes. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But as it stands right now at this moment, I have to give the Canon the edge for wireless connectivity just simply because their app, even though the Nikon in theory can do more things, the Canon performs much better in practice right now. So edge to Canon on that one. In terms of our autofocus systems on both cameras, I find that both these cameras, on paper, it looks like the Nikon wins at first because it has the 39-point autofocus system compared to the 19 points on the Canon. However, the Canon has more cross-type points. So the Canon focus system, even though it doesn't have as many points, it should be more sensitive to focus. As you guys know, I'm not really an action photographer, but if you're more curious about how that works, write me in the comments below and I can see about getting together tests for you on that. What else? Image quality wise, 24 megapixels on both extremely, extremely good. I did some testing and I pretty much didn't come up with any usable sorts of differences. As we saw in the Rebel T6 versus the 3400, the Canon does expose a little bit brighter than the Nikon, but I didn't really feel like image quality was any difference. I didn't see a difference there at all. If you actually look at the samples, you'll notice that going through the ISO range, both cameras do really, really good there. And speaking of ISO, on ISO adjustment on the Nikon, this has always been changed by a little function button over here, which you can change the defaults of. Let me retract the lens or extend the lens. On the Nikon though, when you change your ISO, you have the ability to go in here and actually change the ISO in third stop increments. So a little bit different there. On the Canon, you have an ISO button up at the top there. And on it, that adjustment is actually changed in full stop increments. The Nikon gives you one stop ISO higher. It gives you that 25,600 ISO setting, but it's not really usable. I mean, it's pretty much just like it was on the 3400. There's really no use to having that there. But going up to like the 12,800 ISO setting, I mean, you guys can judge by the samples yourself, but the images look nearly identical in both cameras. They're both really, really good. So no issues there at all. I do like some aspects of the Canon Ergonomics better, but I still kind of have to give it a draw. I mean, they're still so close. It's mostly just preference. You have the ability to go in here and change things like your autofocus and your white balance and your drive modes and so forth with these controls here. On the Nikon, we have our famous info screen here. So we just press the I button, and then we can use the four-way controller, or we can use the touchscreen to go in here and actually change all these different settings. So I don't know, either camera is very, very good there. It's all preference for the most part. A lot of people will see things that they like about either one. I don't think that you can go wrong with either one image quality wise. Go to a local shop, get both cameras in your hands and kind of see which one feels better to you. I think that's going to make a much bigger difference than any small little feature differences between both these cameras. If your friends use Nikon or Canon and you have access to their lenses, that can also be a very, very big factor in your decision also. And aside from that, there's not really a whole lot else to look at between the two of these. If you have questions, though, write me in the comments below. And a lot of people may be wondering about the Rebel T6s. It does add the locking mode dial, and it adds the ability to shoot continuous bursts with the live view screen. And it gives you a top LCD as well as a second command dial. I don't know, guys. If you'd like me to take a look at the T6s, I can see if I can get one in my hands. So write me in the comments below about that. But otherwise, if you're looking for a little bit higher end camera, I personally recommend going with something like the Canon 80D over the T6s, or just save your money and get the T6i and put the rest of the money towards some nice lenses or accessories. Write me in the comments below, though, and let me know what you think about the T6s, or perhaps looking at even other cameras to compare. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, check me out on Instagram as well as Twitter, because I like to give little previews of things I'm testing. And of course, you will be thoroughly entertained with all my randomness. Until next time, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is Jeremy Smith, signing off.